Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government says it has a plan to make electricity rates more affordable. We have the details. We hear from federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who blasted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over his housing record during question period. And a whistleblower at Boeing says the 787 Dreamliner aircraft should be grounded due to safety concerns.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took another shot at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his affordable housing record. Poilievre says in 9 years since Trudeau became Prime Minister, not much has happened.
Oh, he's going to turn public buildings and land into housing. Wonder where he got that idea. Actually, it was, let me quote, "We will conduct an inventory of all federal lands and buildings that could be repurposed and make some of these lands available at low cost for affordable housing." That is from his 2015 budget. And now, 9 years later, he can only point to 13 homes on those public lands. And yesterday, he promised a rapid review of all the federal land portfolios. Rapid review. How rapid? Another 9 years?
We made a choice. We made a choice to invest in Canadians, and that started when we took office because the previous government had not invested in Canadians, continued to choose cuts to services, continued to choose austerity over the kinds of investments that a confident country should be making in its citizens. And that's where we have stepped up, and that's where we are stepping up right now to make sure that young people have the opportunities to build a strong future themselves by asking the wealthiest 0.1% to pay more in taxes.
It appears as though more MPs are speaking out against the recently released Liberal budget. Conservative housing critic Scott Aitchison says more housing measures are needed to address the severe housing crisis here in our country.
In 2017, Justin Trudeau stood in front of a large building project with lots of hardworking Canadians behind him and promised a life-changing, transformational national housing strategy, and we see the transformation. House prices have doubled, rent has doubled, mortgage rates have doubled. People can't afford to put food on their table and pay the rent. And now he promises the most ambitious plan ever. I wouldn't hold my breath, and I wouldn't take the bait this time because these guys are very good at the photo op. They're very good at all the right words. You even see the Minister of Housing now using really great YIMBY language. Proof's always in the pudding, though. They don't get the job done.
Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says her party's budget is aimed at boosting Canada's economic growth and productivity. Now, she made the announcement after touring the Volkswagen manufacturing facility in Burlington, Ontario.
The budget makes new investments in skilled trades workers. We're investing $100 million in apprentices and getting more young people into the skilled trades. That's going to help companies like Metrican hire new workers with the skills that you need and scale up your business. With this budget, we're creating more jobs for younger Canadians by providing $207.6 million for the Student Worker Placement Program. This is a program that helps post-secondary students across Canada get their foot in the door in a job related to their field of study.
The Canadian Labour Congress has not invited Tory leader Pierre Poilievre to speak at a meeting in Ottawa designed to plot strategy ahead of the next federal election. While polls suggest Poilievre's affordability message is resonating with workers, CLC President Beat Brusk says his history of supporting back-to-work legislation makes him hostile to Labour. She told delegates, quote, "We must do everything in our power to expose Mr. Poilievre for the fraud that he is," adding that he's not a friend of the working class. Well, it was nice to see a little more of the sunshine again today across much of southwestern Alberta, but still fairly cool. Jeanette Roche is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, the cooler temperatures should remain for what, a few more days?
Yeah, well, for at least a couple more days before we're back into the double digits and even the teen temperatures, which will put us back into those above seasonal values. But the good news is lots of sunshine for that good dose of vitamin D that we all need, and also not a lot of wind. We're only looking at a 15K wind on Friday, high of 4 degrees, though. Also keep in mind, we are going to be experiencing a bit of wind chill of -11, -10 by the morning. So keep that in mind as we're heading out in the morning. Other than that, we got a decent weekend ahead of us, and I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about it.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Jeanette. An engineer at Boeing is alleging that the aircraft company is taking manufacturing shortcuts that could lead to jetliners breaking apart. Whistleblower Sam Salapour testified before a U.S. Senate subcommittee about Boeing's 787 Dreamliner. He says they should all be grounded since they are, quote, putting out defective airplanes. Hundreds of Dreamliners are in use by airlines, mostly on international routes. Salapour spoke while another Senate committee held a separate hearing on the safety culture at Boeing.
Boeing manufacturing used unmeasured and unlimited amount of force to correct the misalignment. And this also weakens the airplane in the long run. I literally saw people jumping on the pieces of the airplane to get them to align. I call it the Tarzan effect, among other improper methods. Again, I raised concerns internally. I was sidelined. I was told to shut up. I received physical threats. My boss said, I would have killed someone who said what you said in a meeting. And then this is not a safety culture when you get threatened by bringing issues of safety concerns.
Boeing has been under multiple investigations and in crisis mode since a door plug panel blew off a 737 MAX jet during an Alaska Airlines flight over Oregon in January. Shares of Boeing stock have lost more than $47 billion U.S. in market value. The Israel Defense Forces say they have eliminated 2 Hezbollah commanders as the Iranian regime is allegedly growing disappointed with Hezbollah's weak performance. According to TBN Israel's Yair Pinto, the attack was thanks to a couple of strategic Israeli airstrikes.
The first was the commander of the coastal sector of the Shiite terrorist organization, Ismail Youssef Baz. The second was Muhammad Hussein Musafa Savari, who served as the commander of the rocket unit in the western sector with the Raduran force. Prior to Israeli strikes, 2 explosive drones that had been launched from Lebanon hit the Bet Hillel area of the Galilee, resulting in 3 Israelis being wounded. Additionally, a barrage of 10 rockets were fired at the Israeli community of Kiryat Shmona, causing some damage but no casualties. This is because the residents of Kiryat Shmona, like most Galilee communities, were evacuated months ago and are still waiting to return to their homes.
A Polish man is facing 8 years in prison after being arrested for being ready to help Russia's military in an alleged plot to assassinate Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Polish prosecutors are accusing the man of being prepared to pass airport security information to Russian agents. Poland has been a staunch supporter of neighboring Ukraine and fending off Russian aggression for more than 2 years now. Police in Calgary have charged a man with manslaughter in the death of a toddler. Olivia Hayden was rushed to hospital back in September of 2022 and was later pronounced dead. The 2-year-old's death was deemed a homicide following an autopsy and a long police investigation. The accused is set to appear in court on Friday. The Alberta government says we should brace for a very long wildfire season, which has been fueled by drought. In fact, there's still 49 active wildfires burning here in the province. Now, the bulk of them are located in the northern region, including the high-level forest and Slave Lake areas. Christy Tucker with Alberta Wildfires says many of the fires are still burning from last year.
While we've been working diligently to extinguish them, it does mean that firefighters are entering the spring with a heavier fire load than usual. We've already seen more than 500 hectares burned, and that's about 400 hectares more than we had at this time last year. We're hoping for more precipitation to come, but we're prepared for what will happen if it doesn't. Together with municipalities around the province, we've already put a number of measures in place to try and reduce the number of human-caused wildfires on the landscape, and we will continue to do so. Even now, before we've reached a time we traditionally see much wildfire activity, there are fire bans, fire restrictions, and fire advisories already in place.
The province announced that it'll be introducing new legislation and regulations this spring to make electricity more affordable. Officials say there's a plan to increase competition in the electricity market. Default rates will be stabilized by being set for each provider every 2 years. Premier Daniel Smith says this should reduce spikes in prices for Albertans unable to sign a competitive contract.
We will be renaming the regulated rate option to the rate of last resort. We think this will send the right message to Albertans, that this is the rate to sign up for only when there are no other options available, because everyone in our province could use some clarity and certainty about cost right now. So a name change, of course, is one thing, but a name change in itself doesn't get us to where we need to be. That's why we're also making changes to the rate itself. The rate of last resort will be set every 2 years for each provider. So customers have far fewer price spikes and far more certainty about the cost that they'll have to pay.
There's some good news for those who use Highway 41 in the southeast corner of the province. Transport Minister Devin Durishan announced plans to widen the well-used highway. Cypress Medicineat MLA Justin Wright explains what sections of Highway 41 may be expanded.
So what that's going to look like is approximately 52 kilometers from Highway 1. It ends up just going past Elkwater and Cypress Hills Provincial Park, where we are going to be having widening going on down that way, as well as 14 kilometers north of Highway 1 along Highway 41 between the 41 and 41A. That's really going to add to a lot of safety measures and concerns that have been going on down that way. Many of my constituents have had serious near misses on Highway 41, including my family. It's been something that's been very near and dear to me. I'm going to be continuing to focus on this.
Make sure you catch more of the interview with Cypress Medicineat MLA Justin Wright and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our show. The Alberta NDP say their trade workers need more support. The party is introducing Bill 207 of the legislature, which they say will help our vital trade industry in multiple ways.
First, Bill 207 will reinstate compulsory trades. Through the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act, the UCP made it so that compulsory certification for certain trades can be removed. This means that people can practice skilled trades without certification. We can't devalue skilled labor. The second thing Bill 207 is proposing to do is mandate a consultation process within existing skilled trades network. The UCP's Act removed the requirement for provincial and local apprenticeship committees. Bill 207 ensures that union training centres are included in the legislation as a specific delivery entity of skilled trades training.
You may have noticed that gas prices have increased by quite a bit in many regions of the country. Now, here in Alberta, it's due in large part to the return of the provincial fuel tax, along with a 23% increase in the federal carbon tax. In central and eastern Canada, prices have also jumped by quite a bit. Dan McTagg is the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, and he has some of the numbers for us.
I'm here in Ontario, Quebec, or the Maritimes. It's gone to 179.9 here in Toronto, where I live, and it's 190 in Quebec, and it's about $1.95 in Newfoundland, 92 in Nova Scotia, and you get what I'm saying. Prices are much more expensive here. There's about a month ago where we were actually in Toronto about what we were in Alberta, but that's because you guys already had the switch over from winter to summer gasoline. And of course, you have full taxes there. Here in Ontario, we took tax off by about and left it off by about 5 or 6 cents a liter. Nevertheless, the prices are now reflective of what we normally see, and that's Manitoba's given away its provincial sales tax, 14 cents a liter plus GST. So they are the lowest price in the country, relatively speaking, at about $1.43. And the highest, again, British Columbia, in particular Vancouver, at about $2.13 a liter.
You know, whether you're a moviegoer or not, there's no doubt you've been inside the legendary Lethbridge movie mill. Now, its longtime owner is set to retire, but he says not to worry because, like an old character in a screenplay, the mill isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Jeanette Rocher has that story.
For the past 30 years, it's been a staple in the community.
But the family-run business is changing hands for good.
It's time for Act 2 or the sequel.
Len Binning, his wife Deborah, and their children have operated the movie mill since it opened its doors back in 1994. Binning says 2 years ago, 2 local business associates approached the family about buying the movie mill.
They knew that things were a little rough in COVID, and I was having some health challenges at the time, and we sold, but we retained a small portion for our children. And so even though we sold 2.5 years ago, we've still been very involved as a family, all 5 of us.
But now with more health challenges arising, Binning says the family is ready for their second act and will let the new owners take the director's chair permanently by the end of the month.
And we're just at peace. We just feel it's time to turn that switch off finally.
What started as a risky business venture for the Binnings 30 years ago ended up becoming a Lethbridge legacy.
We didn't know our heads from our behinds at the time, and I thought, you know what, this is a risk, but we're young, and if we have to declare bankruptcy, so be it. Our parents were a little doubtful. There were a lot of people who were doubtful, and we're happy to have proved them wrong. We're happy to have become a very vital part of the community. We're voted best theater every year.
As the Binnings are set to make their final curtain call, there's a sense of nostalgia for them, as the movie mill has felt like family.
I think we're all sad. I mean, it is like a fourth child, and we're now sending them off for adoption. So we hope the new foster parents are great, and we're confident they will be.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
After rigorous training and preparation routines, the cheerleading community of Lethbridge is celebrating after winning big at the Canadian Cheer Nationals in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Peak Elite Cheerleading took home many top-tier finishes, including the prestigious National Championship title. The group's coach, Samantha Parody, says the win was very rewarding and she's very proud of her team.
We have some national champions on our hands in Lethbridge. And we're really proud of our little club. We're definitely putting cheerleading on the map in Southern Alberta and doing really well with it. So I couldn't be more proud as a coach and as a gym owner this weekend. So we've been training, running, and executing this routine for a year now. So it is phenomenal to know that it's first in the nation.
Congratulations. The Canadian Cheer Nationals featured 450 teams from 6 provinces in Canada which participated in the competition. The town of Coaldale updated its list of competitions for the 2024 Southern Alberta Summer Games. Around 2,000 athletes and coaches will be taking part in the Games July 3rd through the 6th. One of the exciting new competitions will be the addition of esports. The Games coordinator, Mark McIntosh, explains how it'll work.
So esports, for those who don't know what it is, it's competitive video gaming, and it's a rising sporting event for a lot of local kids in the area. Our event will be focusing on the video game Super Smash Brothers, which is like a brawler from Nintendo, and it'll have athletes from up to 195 different athletes from the 13 regions that are part of the Southern Alberta Summer Games.
This will be the 51st anniversary of the Games and the first full Games since 2019. You know, many people remember the 1981 British historical drama Chariots of Fire. I can still remember that theme song right now. It told the true story of 2 young runners, Eric Little and Harold Abrahams, who were training for the 1924 Paris Olympics. Well, what was enjoyed on the big screen is now being portrayed at Alberta's beloved Rosebud Theatre. Aaron Krogman, who is playing the role of Harold Abrahams, shared insights into this very inspiring story.
Harold wants to have a fight. It's like he's in the ring, wants to have a fight. And Eric, it's like he's a pacifist. And he actually cares more about Harold than Harold realizes. And I think what happens in that scene is that Harold realizes he's got a friend and someone who actually cares about him and sees him and is the exact antidote to all the prejudice that he's been experiencing in his life. Eric really represents a brother in many ways.
Make sure you catch more of my interview with Aaron Krogman, cast member of the play Chariots of Fire, coming up in the second half of our program. Well, it appears as though the cooler temperatures we've been experiencing this week may continue for just a few more days, along with the potential of some liquid sunshine. Full weather details are on deck. It has been a fairly cool week here in Lethbridge. You know, the average high for this time of year is around 14 degrees. We've been far below that. Jeanette Rocher is now with a complete look at the weather picture. Jeanette, will we see a warming trend anytime soon?
Yeah, but not until early next week. As you can see, we start to get into those temperatures. But until then, we are looking at single-digit values throughout the weekend. Friday looking at 2 degrees up to 7 degrees on Saturday with mainly sunny skies. We could see some showers on Sunday, high of 9 degrees, and then we're back into the teens there. 13 for Monday, high of 18 degrees on both Tuesday and Wednesday. So that will put us above average for this time of year, which is 13 degrees, average low 0. 26 was our high temperature back in 1952 is when that happened. And in 1951, 1 year earlier, we were sitting at the record low. Quite a difference there 1 year can make. Minus 14 was that record low. 6:31 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 8:31. That means 14 hours exactly of daylight today. Pretty exciting. 4 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. 15 on the coast tomorrow, at least on the island for Victoria. Clear skies, sunshine in Vancouver, high of 16 degrees, feeling more like 19 the further inland you go. 3 degrees for a high in Edmonton and a high of 2 degrees in Calgary with mainly clear skies in those areas. As we get into Saskatchewan, high of 0 in Saskatoon with clear skies. Now Regina could see a 60% chance of flurries, -1 for a high, and periods of snow remaining in Winnipeg there with a high of 0, so we're still experiencing winter-like conditions in those cities. As we get into the central part of the country, we are seeing more like showers instead of snow. So we're seeing rain in Toronto, 15 for a high there, and then showers also expected in both Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow with highs of 14 degrees in both of those cities. As we get into the East Coast, we're seeing mainly clear skies, high of 15 in Fredericton, 14 for a high in Halifax, 8 for a high in Charlottetown and St. John's, expecting 2 to 4 millimeters of rain and up to 60 km winds there with a high of 2 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Canada's tech industry is voicing disappointment in the newly unveiled federal budget. Ottawa wants business owners to pay income tax on 2/3 of their capital gains earnings. That's up from half. The Trudeau government is also proposing the increase be applied to individuals for capital gains earnings of more than $250,000. The president of the Council of Canadian Innovators says the increase will cause irreparable harm because it could encourage entrepreneurs to open businesses elsewhere. Benjamin Bergen also worries the moves will deter talent from remaining here in the country. That's because the stock options tech companies often dole out what costs them later when they're treated as capital gains. Canada's National Housing Agency reports that housing starts are falling short of growing demand. Experts say addressing a long-standing construction worker shortage will be key to boosting housing supply. The growing labor shortage was cited in a housing supply report by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The agency noted it's one of 3 factors contributing to longer construction times. A report by RBC Assistant Chief Economist Robert Hogue says Canada could need more than 500,000 additional construction workers on average to build all of the homes that will be needed between now and the year 2030. Starbucks will soon begin shipping out new disposable cups with up to 20% less plastic to locations in both Canada and the United States. The company says the move is part of an effort to alleviate some of the plastic waste that has been growing due to booming sales of its cold drinks served in single-use cups. Starbucks says cold drinks now account for 75% of its sales in the United States. It says the reduced plastic cups are part of a commitment to cutting company waste in half by the year 2030. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 52 points on the day to finish at 21,708. The Dow was up 22 points to 37,775. The S&P 500 was down 11 on the day to 5,011, and the Nasdaq was down 81 points to 15,601. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 4 cents to 82.73 US per barrel. Natural gas was also up 4 cents to $1.76 US. Gold was up 18.02 on the day to 23.7905 US an ounce, and silver was up 2 cents to 28.24 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley's at $6.42, canola's at $13.87, and corn is at $7.87 per bushel. Live cattle were up 28 cents to $181.18. Theatre cattle were up $1.18 to $241.60, and lean hogs May contract was down 20 cents to 94.73. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.63 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the UCP announced that it'll be introducing new legislation and regulations later this spring to make electricity rates more affordable. They say more competition in the electricity market will be brought in. Government officials also say that default electricity rates will be stabilized by being set by each provider every couple of years. They say this will reduce spikes in pricing for Albertans unable to sign a competitive contract. Do you remember the blockbuster film Chariots of Fire from 1981? Well, the folks at the Rosebud Theatre here in Alberta have made the movie into a play. We'll hear from one of the lead actors from the Chariots of Fire theatrical production, Aaron Krogman, in just a moment. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. Back in the early 1920s, while class prejudices and religious divisions were taking place in the United Kingdom, two young runners demonstrated an unyielding determination as they trained for the 1924 Paris Olympics. One ran to challenge those prejudices, while the other sought to glorify God through his athletic prowess. Now, this compelling narrative was beautifully illustrated in the 1981 British historical sports drama film Chariots of Fire, and is now being revisited by the creative team at Rosebud Theatre here in Alberta. Aaron Krogman is a board member of the Rosebud Fellowship and part of the cast of this very exciting project. Aaron, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks very much.
So how did your background in theatre at Rosebud School of the Arts really prepare you for this role at Chariots of Fire?
Well, it's a post-secondary professional theater training program, and I ate it up as a student in the 2000s. I came in 2004, and I've been doing shows. I think this is my 20th production for Rosebud Theatre, so I've done a fair few of them, and I feel like it's the thing I do. It's the thing I know to do and have trained to do and have practiced doing.
So, Aaron, can you describe the unique challenges of portraying your character, Harold Abrahams, in Chariots of Fire?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge for me is the running. We're running on stage. We're running full out, and I'm not as young as I once was, and I got to take care of my joints and my knees because it's a long run. I think that's probably the foremost challenge that we've been working with and rising to. Yeah, it's been successful so far.
So do you have to carb up, maybe have a little bit of spaghetti or maybe some rice?
Well, actually, I've actually lost about 25 pounds since Christmas.
Wow.
I've been doing some running and a bit more just fitness and as a way to prep. If I'm carrying less weight, it's less hard on the joints.
So did your previous experience of performing the role of Jesus and the Canadian Badlands Passion Play really influence your performance?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a physically demanding, lots of running, moving, covering all kinds of ground. I think one time I mapped it out for the Passion Play. I do about 7 kilometers in a run through of the play, and it's elevation and running and all kinds of stuff. So in terms of the physical demands of Chariots of Fire, it feels really similar, but also a lot of Jewish context. My character Harold Abrams is Jewish and has that as his heritage, and Jesus also, is alive and at the time of lots of really interesting time in Jewish history, and so there's lots of overlap for sure.
Now, did the directors actually talk to you a little bit about the cardio that's involved with some of your roles here?
Yeah. I think they just assume that I'm up for it, but I would say that, I'm a dad. I have a couple girls that are pretty young, and most of my exercise in the last few years has been like fighting with car seats in the back seat, carrying kids. So getting my legs back in shape has been good, but I'm excited for it too.
So Aaron, what aspects of your character in Chariots of Fire really resonated with you the most?
I think it's the psychological aspect of high achievement that I think is really fascinating. These characters are driven to perform and to achieve and to win, to succeed, and whether they do or don't is tricky, and it's a lot to navigate. And Harold in particular, he's motivated to, matter to his dad. He's got older brothers who are high level achievers, and he wants to matter to his dad. I think he feels like he doesn't, and um, that's a big piece of what's been really fascinating about exploring this character.
So, how did physically demanding roles like the one in Chariots of Fire impact your approach to being a performer?
Um, in some ways, it takes so much of the focus. There are times when you do a role, and the thing you give all your attention to is the character or the accent or the some psychological aspect. But when you're like, how my legs are they going to be okay today? Are they going to hurt? It takes so much of your attention, and then the acting actually just becomes natural, and you don't overwork it, you don't worry it. You're paying attention to the immediate now of what's happening with your body, which is actually a great way to think about acting. And so I appreciate the physical aspect of it because it helps you do your job better, I think.
So, during a theatrical run, do you kind of try and stay in character as much as you can, even when you're off set? Well, how does that really work for you? Are you able to just turn it off and on fairly quickly?
I think it's a little bit of both. This particular character that I'm playing, I'm busy the entire time. When I step off stage for a moment, it's maybe for a scene, and I've got a costume change. I'm getting ready for the next thing, so I'm very present mentally with with Harold, what's happening for him, what's just happened, what's next, what he wants. It's a roller coaster that doesn't really leave me alone the entire run, and that's really exciting too. I love that aspect of getting to play Harold.
Some actors I've chatted with in the past say sometimes it's psychologically damaging, some of the roles that they take on, because they really put themselves into this character, learning more, doing the research of the character, and it really impacts their lives even long term. So let me ask you something. Can you talk about the psychological depth of your character and how you really prepared for it and how it's maybe impacted you personally?
You know, I I agree that it can be challenging to navigate difficult emotional and psychological moments when you're playing characters. Um, I've done it enough times now, I guess, that I kind of trust it. I know what it is, and I know what it's like to move through big runs, long runs of plays, and spending a lot of time. And I think it's a little bit of the discipline of what you pay attention to. When we take breaks, we laugh a lot. We you swing into the lighter side of life, especially when you're dealing with stuff that's kind of heavy. And I think Harold is a role that it's there's a lot of heaviness in it, but at the same time, it's always an opportunity to explore what's true and what's alive for me. And I the question he gets asked over and over again is, why do you run? And the implication is that he doesn't know, and he's making a mess of his life because he doesn't know himself well enough. And it's an opportunity for me to ask myself the same question each time. Why do I do what I do? How well do I know myself? And so it's just a great platform for me to like grow as a human being every time I do it. I think that's part of how I navigate some of what can be difficult.
Did they ask the same question of Forrest Gump once? Oh no, they just yelled, "Run, Forrest, run!" That's what it was. That's right. Okay, Aaron, let's talk about one of the pivotal scenes here in your confrontation with Eric Little.
Yeah, I love that scene. Um, these two guys have been battling, but it's almost like Harold wants to have a fight. It's like he's in the ring, wants to have a fight, and Eric, he's it's like he's a pacifist, and he actually cares more about Harold than Harold realizes. And I think what happens in that scene is that Harold realizes he's got a friend and someone who actually cares about him and sees him, and is the exact antidote to all the prejudice that he's been experiencing in his life. Eric really represents a brother in many ways, and I think that's where that really becomes apparent to Harold in that scene. He pushes and pushes, and Eric just is generous with him. and it's a beautiful thing. It's unexpected and beautiful, and it makes the difference for Harold, I think, in his big journey of letting go of all the stuff that he carries and is burdened by.
So, Aaron, let's talk a bit about your experience working with the director and the rest of the Cats and Chariots of Fire.
Morris Ertman is the director. I've worked with him lots. He's been a huge part of my life as an artist. He's the director I've worked with more than anyone else, and I think this particular show really suits his style of directing. You know, and it's just been a blast. I love working with Morris. It's a known quantity for me, and yet it's always kind of challenging and interesting, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull it off, and yet it's a it's a really fruitful and alive rehearsal hall with Morris all the time. And I would say too, there's lots of new cast members to Rosebud Theater, people who are in Rosebud for the first time on a show, and you never know what you're going to get sometimes, like with us in-house people and then the newcomers. And I'm always a little bit nervous if they're going to like me and how it's going to go, but it's been such a great cast, like unbelievably great. I've been so blessed by it. I feel like it's a really warm, dedicated, professional, hardworking, lots of heart across the board, and it's been a great joy to be with them and to hit the deck every day with them.
That's wonderful to hear. Now, outside of all of the running, what were some of the other challenging aspects of your role in Chariots of Fire?
It's an accent show. Like it takes place in the UK, and there's lots of accents, and dialect is always kind of exciting to get to do, and I've really enjoyed that. I had to kind of pay attention to some of the pronunciations, and we want to make it clear for audiences too that that come, and you got to fill the house. There's Scottish accents, there's English accents, there's some American accents and that's really always, I love accent plays. It's always exciting to get to find that new voice and flavor, and it informs so much of the storytelling. So yeah, it's great for that too.
Give me your best Scottish brogue. Can you give me one?
Well, all right. I'll do my best, but I don't do Scottish in the play. I do British.
That's right,
so,
British. Okay.
I haven't been practicing Scottish, although sometimes when I'm in a scene with someone doing Scottish, it kind of like triggers me to
Does it
respond
rub off
in
on you,
Scottish.
maybe?
Yeah, but I try to fight that as best I can.
Okay, let's say
yeah.
you're from Liverpool, England. Give me a nice British accent.
Oh yeah. What do you think? What do you think of this accent? I don't know. Yes.
We'll order some kippers and bits. Now, what are your thoughts on the trend of adapting films like Chariots of Fire into stage plays, Aaron?
I think it's cool. I think it's challenging. I think people come with a bit of an expectation, and so you want to, you want people to come away with their expectations met, more than met, and that's the challenge and the hope. But I think my experience of the people who have come to see the play, like we're achieving that. My Uncle Tony came yesterday, and he just could not stop talking about how amazed he was by it. And he was in that kind of like afterglow. He just could not believe what he had seen in the theater. And that feels really great. People are like, how are they going to possibly do that on the stage? And they come with that question, and it gets answered in an amazing way. I love that.
How about some of the spiritual elements of the play and planting seeds for Christ along the way?
Well, I think that's happening in this play. Like we get to see Eric Liddell kind of live out following his convictions and his faith, in a challenging way. And in the end, it's a really fruitful thing, and I think who we are and the fruit we bear with the lives we live is measured in how well we love people around us. And I think that's what the play exemplifies, is that Eric Liddell loved people. He just put it into practice. He loves the person who should be his enemy in the play. He loves him. That's Harold. And I think sometimes there's a spectrum of like really explicit evangelism, and then really implicit. And I think on the storytelling side, where we tend towards the implicit in general, and this play it kind of rides the line between the two, and it does it in a really lovely way. It's nuanced, it's a play about running, but it's a play about what people believe, and it's about who they are. And I think it isn't always often that Christianity in media gets a fair shake, you know, and it's sometimes two dimensionally maligned. And this play is not that. We get to see someone as a full human, three-dimensionally living out the challenge and opportunity of a faith-filled life, and that's Eric Little for sure.
Aaron Krogman is a board member of the Rosebud Fellowship and part of the cast of Chariots of Fire, which is running at the Rosebud Theatre until May 25th. Aaron, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So how are things in southeastern Alberta these days? Well, we're going to chat about it today with our guest, Justin Wright, who is the new MLA for the Medicine Hat Cypress constituency. Welcome to Bridge City News, Justin. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks so much for a great welcome. You know, anytime I can get on and talk about the great things in the charming constituency of Cypress Medicine Hat, I always look for an opportunity to talk about it. So
yeah, it's funny. Like I mentioned that you're new, but really it's been almost a year now. It was since last May. Yeah. So what, about 10 months?
Yeah, give or take 10 months. Right. You know, it's been quite the learning experience.
I bet. Okay, so why don't we begin with the ongoing issue of affordability and inflation? So your constituency is fairly dependent on the oil and gas industry, and the carbon tax continues to increase, which impacts so many areas of the economy. So what kinds of feedback are you getting from people in your riding?
Well, you know, the most common piece is they're just looking for it to end. And yeah. One of the first things that we did when we got in was pass a government motion requesting that Ottawa remove it from our home heating oils as a start. It's unfortunate that we couldn't get a unanimous vote on that. There was our opposition that did not vote in favor of that. But carbon tax is affecting everyday Albertans in everyday ways. And it continues to pile on. And I look at the cost when we talk about even just utility bills, the just exorbitant amount of cost that goes into that. It's an opportunity where if we really pulled that off as a country, if we stopped having that carbon tax, you would see our inflation and affordability crisis take a really big chunk out of what's plaguing everyday Albertans.
Oh yeah, and I mean, we're all feeling it, aren't we? 100%. And of course, the ability to purchase a home continues to be out of the reach for many Albertans. That's something else we've been talking about. So we do need to see an increase in the supply of affordable homes somehow, don't we? So any thoughts on changes needed to make that a reality?
Well, we have, I think, the right minister in charge of that profile with Minister Nixon, and we're already seeing positive changes to the market from a policy perspective. I'm just going to give a few stats and changes that we've seen here. So we've seen the most housing starts in January of 2024 since 2015. So that's really positive, good news. As well as we're seeing a 48% housing increase on starts since January 2023. So we're seeing a positive trend moving in the right direction to free up housing for our everyday Albertans, right? And these are really key metrics that show us that we're on the right trajectory and that we're going to keep pushing down this path to ensure that we have housing in line with the needs of Albertans. You know, as Alberta continues to be a destination both for immigration internationally as well as domestically, it's going to continue to be a need that we need to go after. And policies in place and red tape reduction have really begun to show the fruit of those initiatives, and I'm really pleased to see the uptick in the number of home starts that we've seen already, and look forward to continuing this path.
Okay. Let's touch base on the drought conditions that we've been experiencing over the last number of years in southern Alberta. Justin, you're part of the Alberta Drought Committee. So what is being done to ensure that the ag sector pulls through this and that our municipalities have proper water supplies?
Yeah, one of my colleagues from Tabor Warner likes to use the saying of whiskey is for drinking and water's for fighting. And right now, that rings pretty true across Southeast Alberta and really the whole province. As part of the Water Advisory Committee, Minister Schultz has put together a large group or a large variety of backgrounds. So we have got industry representative, we've got Indigenous communities represented, we've got agri-food, we've got municipalities, we've got egg producers, you name it. They're irrigators. I missed irrigators, can't forget them. No. You kind of hit on it. It's really important. It's affecting every day. So it's been a absolutely remarkable opportunity to take the voice of the grassroots with this Water Advisory Committee, present it to the minister, present it to the Ministry of Environment and Protected Areas, to be able to really shape what policy would look like going forward. And the minister's already put in some remarkable programs like Water Smart, and they're continuing to evaluate what that looks like over the coming seasons, because there's going to be a lot of impact as to what crops our egg producers are going to be putting in the ground, determined by the amount of water that's available, as well as looking at some of the different avenues, such as regulations around dugouts, regulations around on-water storage, are all topics of conversation that have been had part of the Water Advisory Committee. But ultimately the decisions fall right where they should, which is with the EPA ministry and Minister Schultz. They'll make the ultimate decisions as to what is best, and we do our best to get the voices of different industries, municipalities, Indigenous communities, and really roll them up to ensure that we've got the correct information in a timely manner to help the minister and her team make the right call as part of the drought response team.
Okay. Justin, your constituency extends all the way down to the U.S. border. Highway 3 is going to be twinned over the next few years, finally. So what about Highway 41 south? I'm told that it needs to be widened. Are there any plans to do that?
You know what? I appreciate you asking that question. Minister Dreeshen was just in the riding a few weeks ago and made an announcement that we are in the planning stages, as well as the partway to the engineering planning for a Highway 3 widening, or Highway 41 widening, in conjunction with the Highway 3 announcement. So what that's going to look like is approximately 52 kilometers from Highway 1. It ends up just going past Elkwater and Cypress Hills Provincial Park, where we are going to be having widening going on down that way, as well as 14 kilometers north of Highway 1 along Highway 41 between the 41 and 41A. That's really going to add to a lot of safety measures and concerns that have been going on down that way. Many of my constituents have had serious near misses on Highway 41, including my family. It's been something that's been very near and dear to me. I'm going to be continuing to focus on this because I think it's just absolutely vitally important for both of our safety of our everyday constituents that are driving that road, going home, going to their ranches, but also for our tourism sector in the southeast corner. Elkwater and Cypress Hills provide a wealth of economic investment when it comes to tourism and people traveling down that road with RVs and boats and jet skis and all those great recreational pieces. If we can't do it in a safe manner, that's going to really impact what we see from a tourism perspective. And for myself, I sit on on a committee called PENWAR. It's the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. I'm one of the delegates. And we talk a lot about corridors, and I view Highway 41 very much as a very important corridor for trade because it has the potential to connect the U.S. with a direct north-south route, potentially all the way up to Fort McMurray, Cold Lake, Bonnyville area, and definitely the Oyen area where we're also seeing a lot of oil and gas development still going on.
Wow, okay, well, that's great news. Safety first, absolutely. Okay, so switching gears here, how is the aerospace and defense industry doing in Medicine Hat?
You know what, I don't want to use the word booming because I'm cautiously optimistic that very soon we'll be able to use that wording. But we are seeing such a massive uptick in regards to new starts going on in in our region, specifically in aviation, aerospace, and defense. And, I've been kind of floating the idea of trying to get an AAD corridor stretching from Medicine Hat to Edmonton. There's a lot of tech developers working in the aerospace realm in Edmonton, but there's a lot of rocket design, a lot of radar design going on in Medicine Hat, as well as drones. We have a great advantage with our foremost aerial drone range, and that allows for out of sight flying of drones. And we are the only location in Western Canada that has one of those. So it's providing a really key advantage that we can focus on to have this be one of those industries that could potentially backfill the gap that was left from the 2008 recession, when we saw the vast majority of oil and gas pull out of the area. So this gives us an opportunity to have great paying jobs, high level of competency, and really take and birth something that hasn't really been in Western Canada, which is a aviation, aerospace, and defense industry. Often they set up and this gives us a brand new industry that we can focus on. And I am so proud that we've had so many of these new startups pick Medicine Hat as being their choice location to develop the great and amazing new technologies that are available out there.
Now, I understand that there's demand from some of these industries to see some upgrades to the Wild Horse U.S. border crossing.
Yeah, there's been a large push. This has been ongoing for a number of years, and I really appreciate the Premier's tenacity on this. Her and the governor from Montana actually wrote a joint letter asking both federal governments to explore this. We need a second commercial port in Alberta. Right now, Coutts is the only avenue, and I hear pretty regularly that if we have manufacturers trying to get their parts and goods to market in the eastern side of the U.S., they're often having to backtrack approximately 3 hours to Coutts to come back across if they don't want to go through Saskatchewan, just based upon timing. So if we can get the Wild Horse crossing, even a 16-hour crossing joint location, similar to what we would see in Coutts, as well as commercial, it's going to give us the great opportunity to get those goods to market. But also, when I look at last year's disaster, or not, what was it? It was a state of agricultural disaster that the Cypress County had declared. Getting feed up to Alberta was a big challenge for a lot of ag producers because they weren't able to cross at Coutts. Or sorry, they weren't able to cross at Wild Horse. They had to drive to Coutts, and that added an exponential amount of cost to getting that feed up there, where now it didn't become viable for many of them. And when we look, a lot of our manufacturers are saying that by going through Coutts or going through Saskatchewan, it's adding up to 14% to their transportation costs. So they're looking at that as to how we can advocate to make sure that we're being responsible for this economic corridor, which is Highway 41, which is your main way from our area in the Medicine Hat region all the way down into the States, taking you just out by Havre. And we're seeing that the Americans have already started making investments in their infrastructure on that side of the border. So we're continuing to evaluate and push for much the same thing.
Wow. Okay. Now, Justin, I believe that you're the provincial liaison with the military. So can you update us on where things are with the Suffield military base just outside of Medicine Hat there?
Yeah, so with that, I've been in fairly regular contact with Lieutenant Colonel Anderchuk. They're continuing to evaluate the situation. You know, the British BATIS folks, there is still some stationed there. They're evaluating what the future looks like for them. But I have also spoken with Brigadier General Graham. He has expressed his commitment that CFB Suffield will be one of the jewels, remain one of the jewels of Canadian 3rd Division. And as we are continuing to keep our ear to the ground, we're very hopeful and optimistic for a very positive turn of events for CFB Suffield, as it's very important to our economic area from a perspective of, new people coming in, constant trade over. I look at a number of years ago when the British soldiers would do training exercises, the economic impact that brought to the community. As well as, we've got a really rich history of service down in our area. I look at the South Alberta Light Horse, which is often referred to as Medicine Hat's Regiment. It's a very important, rich history of really care and compassion to our servicemen and women that have been through this area in all of the great conflicts. So we're cautiously optimistic for what the future holds, but also in regards to what the future can bring in regards to a evolution of what goes on there.
Right. Now, you mentioned the British soldiers. Is there concern over the downsizing of the UK military presence there and how that could affect the economy?
There's always going to be concern when you see a large group of folks exit the area. However, I think with the current instability over in Europe, we'll say, I think that's a nice way of putting it. I completely understand why they're looking to position most of their troops much closer to home, especially their armor, just given the rapid response that may be needed should things escalate.
Well, Justin, it looks like we're about out of time here, but thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate having you on.
No worries. Would gladly be back. Thank you.
All right. Justin Wright is the MLA for the Medicine Hat Cypress constituency in Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.